The Earth is old enough to have carried many stories that no one remembers. Its rocks hold memories older than words, older than myth, older even than the rise of mammals. Yet, if the world has turned itself over so many times, if oceans have risen and fallen, mountains broken and reformed, glaciers stretched and retreated, then what remains of what came before us? The Silurian Hypothesis whispers of this possibility, that civilization may not be unique to humans, that the soil beneath our cities could hide the traces of others who once stood at the center of their own age of light. It is not a tale of dragons or fantasy, but of geology, chemistry, and silence, the silence of aeons that erase every fragile line of memory. Some suggest that if an intelligent species had lived millions of years ago, all its monuments would be dust, its machines scattered into unrecognizable fragments. Yet might the Earth itself carry scars not of tectonics alone, but of deliberate design. Carbon isotopes, sudden warming events, rare deposits of metals, these may be nothing more than natural rhythms, or they may be shadows cast by forgotten hands. And if such hands once shaped the Earth, how far did they reach? How completely were they lost? And why does the air still taste faintly of something unnamed when we ask these questions in the dark? Welcome to ARCHAEON. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. A planet breathes slowly, and in that breath entire civilizations can be swallowed, erased, made indistinguishable from the soil itself. When geologists bend over a rock face and run their hands across the layered sediment, they are not merely tracing stone, they are brushing against calendars of a world that has lived and died in rhythms so long they dissolve all memory. Within those strata lies the beginning of the Silurian Hypothesis, not as a claim, but as a question. If we truly are not the first to rise, then where are the bones of our predecessors, the echoes of their voices, the ruins of their dreams? And if nothing can be found, is that not precisely what should be expected, if time has washed them away with the same indifference it shows to oceans and mountains? The Silurian Hypothesis was first framed not by poets, but by scientists, by Adam Frank, an astrophysicist, and Gavin Schmidt, a climatologist, who wondered aloud in a paper published in 2018 whether industrial civilizations might have existed long before humans. Their proposal was not born of fantasy, but of an unsettling honesty. Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and anatomically modern humans have only occupied its surface for a breath, a flicker, less than 300,000 years. If our species burns brightly and collapses tomorrow, how long would our mark endure? Concrete will crumble in centuries, steel in less. Even the monuments we consider eternal, the pyramids, the Great Wall, will fade beneath the weight of 10,000 years. Against the span of hundreds of millions, nothing built by human hands would survive. The question then becomes not about ruins, but residues. What if civilization is detectable not through temples and tools, but through the chemistry of the Earth itself? A sudden spike in carbon dioxide levels, a mysterious warming of the climate, plastics ground into microparticles embedded in the soil, metals alloyed in ways the Earth does not naturally create, These would be the fingerprints left behind. Our own era is already writing its chemical autobiography into the rocks, a layer of radioactive isotopes from nuclear detonations, a coating of soot from our combustion engines, an unnatural abundance of nitrogen from fertilizers. Millions of years from now, all architecture may be gone, but the rocks will carry the memory of our burning. And so the hypothesis whispers, has this not happened before? Consider the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum about 56 million years ago. The planet's temperature spiked by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius, oceans turned acidic, and species vanished. Some geologists interpret this as a natural release of methane hydrates, a geological convulsion. Yet others ask, what if the event bears the trace of industry? If a civilization had arisen in the deep past, would its collapse not look exactly like this? A sharp warming, a sudden pulse of carbon, a silence after. The Earth doesn't care whether carbon comes from volcanoes or machines. It only records the surge. Another shadow appears in the Ordovician, long before dinosaurs, when enigmatic metal concentrations were laid down in sediments. Iridium, often tied to extraterrestrial impacts, appears in layers at unexpected intervals. Could such anomalies reflect mining or industrial waste rather than asteroid strikes? The hypothesis does not insist but suggests, offering the faintest trail of thought into a past where evidence may have been smudged beyond recognition. For if an ancient civilization burned its forests, harvested its fuels, and fell, its bones would not endure, but its atmosphere would. The only archive large enough to contain forgotten empires is the sky itself, written in gases and isotopes. And yet, if such a people once lived, where are their myths? Would not the legends of our species carry at least a flicker of remembrance? Strangely, human traditions across continents speak of resets, of floods and fires, of worlds that ended so others might begin. The Sumerians told of a flood so great it erased all before it. Hindu cosmology imagines cycles of creation and destruction, the yugas, in which countless worlds rise and fall. The Maya envisioned suns that had died before the present one. Are these only metaphors for natural cataclysms, or fragments of stories older than humanity itself, drifting down like ash from a forgotten fire? Of course, mainstream science resists these whispers. The fossil record is clear in its silence. No bones of beings like us, no evidence of tools or technologies beyond stone, no great anomalies that demand the existence of precursors. Extinction events, from the Permian die-off to the Chicxulub asteroid, are devastatingly well explained by natural forces. To suggest otherwise risks pulling science into myth. Yet the hypothesis does not ask us to accept, only to imagine. If we ourselves vanished tomorrow, what would the Earth remember of us 50 million years hence? Perhaps only an echo in the strata, indistinguishable from the signatures of other upheavals. The true challenge is scale. Human imagination is poorly equipped to grasp millions of years. We think in terms of dynasties and empires, but not in epochs. We are startled by the collapse of Rome, yet Rome itself was a flicker. Dinosaurs ruled the planet for 165 million years, and not a trace of their intelligence, if they had any, remains but bones. How could a species that built with wood and fiber, melted metals and glass, hope to leave a footprint across eons? Even the greatest cities of today would dissolve into nothing if left untended for only a few thousand years. Multiply that absence by tens of millions, and the silence becomes overwhelming. There is, however, a paradox. If civilizations can rise and be erased so completely, how can we ever know we are alone in time? The Silurian hypothesis stands at this knife's edge. It insists that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, that the past may have buried more than we dare imagine. The earth renews itself. Oceans digest continents. Volcanoes devour skies. Glaciers carve away plains. To search for a civilization before humans is to search in a library where every page has been burned and rewritten countless times. What we find may be less than fragments, only smudges of ink where a word once stood. Yet there is a haunting beauty in this thought, that perhaps we are not the beginning but only the latest verse in a poem too vast to recite, that civilizations, like waves, rise, crest, and collapse, not just here but everywhere in the cosmos. For if on Earth, why not on other worlds? Mars, with its dried riverbeds and whispers of methane, may hold a ghost story in its dust. Venus, once perhaps cooler, may have harbored seas that boiled away long before we learned to measure them. If industrial civilizations can vanish without a trace even on our own planet, how can we be sure we would recognize them on another? The hypothesis becomes less a claim about history and more a meditation on impermanence. To walk through a museum and see the skeletons of creatures long gone is to recognize how thin is the thread of memory. To imagine entire cultures erased without remainder is only a deepening of that recognition. We walk on a planet that has forgotten almost everything, that has folded its memories into stone and ash. And perhaps it is not that the past has been silent, but that we do not yet know how to listen. Still, the thought lingers like smoke. If there were others before us, what would they think of us now? Would they see in our restless machines and fragile empires the same arc that led to their own undoing? Would they recognize the signs of a species running against time, altering its climate, testing the patience of the earth? Or would they see us as children repeating mistakes written long ago into a geology we cannot yet decipher? The silence of stone does not answer, but it invites. And so the question remains suspended in the night air, unsettled, unresolvable, and perhaps that is its power. For to ask whether we are the first is also to ask what it means to last, what it means to leave a mark, what it means to exist within a universe that erases as quickly as it creates. The Silurian hypothesis, like a shadow across the rocks, does not tell us who we are, but reminds us how easily we could be forgotten. A silence lies beneath the oceans, a silence deeper than any cavern or night sky, and it is within this abyss that the imagination lingers when considering whether others may have once walked before us. If the earth is a patient archivist, then the sea is its most secret vault, swallowing continents, cradling ruins, erasing outlines of what may have once risen from the shore. Geologists remind us that 70% of the Earth's surface lies hidden beneath waves, and tectonic plates, relentless in their drift, drag entire landscapes down into the mantle where no trace can survive. If a civilization had bloomed in ages before ours, would its monuments not now sleep beneath miles of water, indistinguishable from volcanic stone, invisible to every probe we have lowered into the dark? The oceans themselves whisper of resets. There is the enigmatic storehouse of the continental shelves, where drowned river valleys and ancient shorelines trace coastlines long lost. During the last ice age, sea levels were far lower, exposing vast plains where humans once hunted. We know this because archaeology retrieves spears and hearths from places now submerged. If so much of our own young story is already hidden beneath water, what of epochs far older, whose coastlines are unrecognizable, whose maps no longer match any geography we know? The drowned world is not only a metaphor in myth, but a literal truth in geology. How easily, then, could the memory of others have been drowned before we arrived? The myths of deluge, carried by cultures as far apart as Mesopotamia and Mesoamerica, seem to echo this geologic truth. The Sumerian epic of Ziusudra, the biblical story of Noah, the Hindu tale of Manu guided by a fish, the Aztec account of a flood destroying a previous sun, all record the drowning of worlds. To read these as allegories alone is to overlook their peculiar universality. Why would disparate peoples across continents remember water as the destroyer of ages? Perhaps it is only the Earth's climate cycles, glaciers advancing and retreating. Yet in the murmur of these stories lies another possibility, that water, time and again, has washed away more than forests and fields, but entire ways of being, entire cultures no one recalls. Science, as cautious as a stonecutter, offers its counterpoint. Sediments speak clearly, fossils reveal lineages, and nowhere do we find the anomalous bones of an intelligent precursor species. The Silurian hypothesis accepts this but looks sideways, into the shadows. For what if intelligence once arose not in bones like ours, but in forms unlike any we could imagine? What if their traces are not fossils but alterations of climate and chemistry, signals that masquerade as natural processes? The PETM, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, rises again here as a candidate. The sudden surge of carbon dioxide and warming across the globe, lasting 200,000 years, has no definitive cause. Was it methane released from the ocean, or something more? The answer is buried in isotopes, their ratios shifting in ways that could be both natural or unnatural. Ambiguity itself becomes the haunting. Consider also the enigmatic Fermi paradox, not of time, but of space. If the universe is old and vast, and if life arises naturally, why do we not see signs of advanced civilizations everywhere? One answer is that civilizations flare and collapse too quickly to overlap. They leave chemical scars, not monuments. In this sense, the Silurian hypothesis is Earth's echo of the Fermi question. Perhaps the cosmos is not silent because intelligence never arises, but because it erases itself or is erased, leaving behind only geological palimpsests. Our planet, then, may already hold its forgotten verses, but we mistake them for noise. The search for technosignatures, traces of technology rather than biology, expands this thought. Scientists propose to look not only for radio signals, but for industrial pollutants in exoplanet atmospheres, or waste heat detectable across the stars. If such signs are worthy of searching beyond Earth, why not search for them within its own past? This is the unsettling inversion the Silurian hypothesis offers, that the same methods we design to find others among the stars might reveal that others once stood here, long ago. Our telescopes point outward, but perhaps they should also turn inward, toward the stone beneath our feet. There are more tangible hints, though always ambiguous. Anomalous metal spheres unearthed in South Africa, their grooves too precise for comfort, dated at billions of years, though likely natural concretions. The Baghdad battery, 2 millennia old, its function debated. Was it ritual or a forgotten technology? The Antikythera mechanism, a marvel of gears from ancient Greece, centuries ahead of its time, suggesting lost lines of knowledge. These are not proofs of pre-human civilization, but they demonstrate how easily our understanding of history shifts when chance unearths a mechanism or artifact. If such surprises can lie hidden within a few thousand years, what might the strata of millions conceal or obscure beyond recovery? And then there is the paradox of absence. If an advanced civilization did exist, its tools may have been ephemeral, like ours. Plastics degrade, metals corrode, wood and fiber vanish almost instantly in geological terms. What survives in deep time are not artifacts, but accidents. Bones fossilized in rare conditions, impressions left in mud turned to stone. Even if 1 in a billion objects endured, what chance would we have of discovering it in the scattered fragments of Earth we have excavated? Archaeology is young, geology selective, and time merciless. To expect clarity is perhaps to misunderstand the nature of memory itself. The myths, however, persist. Plato's Atlantis, a civilization destroyed by water. The Tamil Sangam legends of Kumarikandam, a lost land south of India. The Maori stories of land swallowed by the sea. To dismiss these as coincidence is tempting, yet their recurrence provokes reflection. Are humans haunted by archetypal fears of drowning? Or are these scattered voices remembering deeper catastrophes that erased entire landscapes? If humans, with memory so brief, still tell of floods from thousands of years ago, then what of stories older than us, carried not in words, but in the stone rhythms of the planet itself? Conflict emerges between the clarity of science and the shadows of speculation. Most geologists insist that natural cycles suffice, that no hidden architects are required. And yet the same geologists acknowledge that our current Anthropocene epoch will leave a mark indistinguishable from certain past events. Plastic turned into stone, strange isotopes locked into strata, global warming abrupt in scale. If we accept our own legacy will look geologically ordinary to the far future, why must we dismiss the possibility that what we read as natural events in the past might themselves conceal legacies of civilizations erased? This thought rises to its own climax when we consider the cyclicality of extinction. Every few tens of millions of years, the Earth undergoes upheavals, mass extinctions, climate collapses, reorganizations of life. To most, these are the blind movements of geology and biology. To the hypothesis, they are also opportunities. Each reset could have hidden a rise and fall. Each silence could mask a forgotten story. If humanity itself were to collapse tomorrow, burned away by its own combustion, the next species to rise in 50 million years might never know we were here. Our ruins would be dust, our signals gone, our cities submerged. Only isotopes and whispers would remain, and so the ocean becomes an image of the mind itself, vast, unlit, holding wrecks no eye has seen. The hypothesis is not an answer, but a meditation on that abyss. To contemplate it is to sit on a shoreline at night, hearing the tide withdraw, wondering what it has taken with it. Did it take only sand and shells? Or did it pull down entire histories into a silence we can no longer disturb? The ending of this meditation does not resolve. It only turns quietly inward. Perhaps the earth itself dreams, erasing as it creates, holding its memories in patterns no mind has yet deciphered. To ask whether we are the first is to confront the brevity of our own flame, the inevitability of erasure. What we build may endure in museums and monuments, but in the measureless ledger of the planet, it is only a line of chalk easily brushed away. Beneath that truth lies a humbling thought. We do not walk on untouched ground, but on palimpsests. Our world may be layered not only with stone and water, but with forgotten civilizations whose silence has become the bedrock of our own. And in that silence, something still waits, not to reveal, but to remind. In the stillness of night, when the mind drifts toward unanswerable questions, there is a strange comfort in imagining that the story of humanity is neither first nor last, but one verse in a greater chorus. The Silurian Hypothesis draws its strength not from proof, but from suggestion, from the recognition that the Earth itself is an unreliable narrator. It erases as it writes, hides as it reveals. And within this tension arises a deeper question. If not through fossils or ruins, how else might a lost civilization whisper its presence? The answer may lie not in stone alone, but in the delicate balance of climate, in sudden anomalies, in disturbances that echo across time. The geological record is filled with disruptions, strange moments when equilibrium faltered. The Permian-Triassic extinction, the so-called Great Dying, eliminated more than 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial ones. To mainstream science, this was the result of massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia, which poured carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Yet in the framing of the hypothesis, one cannot help but wonder, what if there were more than volcanism at work? What if the Earth's convulsions coincided with the final breaths of a civilization that had long been building, consuming, burning? The chemical evidence cannot tell us intention. It cannot distinguish between an eruption and an industry. It records only the surge, the suffocation, the silence. Similar enigmas appear elsewhere. Layers of coal and shale that suggest rapid burning of forests, sudden shifts in carbon isotope ratios that point to vast releases of greenhouse gases, even the possibility of mass die-offs linked to methane clathrates released from the oceans. All can be explained naturally, but they also resemble, hauntingly, the trajectory we ourselves have set in motion. It is not that geologists secretly believe in forgotten empires, but rather that the Earth does not distinguish between fire sparked by lightning and fire sparked by machines. It simply bears the scar. There are more intimate anomalies, too, not of mass extinction, but of strange objects that refuse to fit comfortably within our narrative. The iron pillar of Delhi, which resists corrosion far beyond expectation. Ancient maps, such as the Piri Reis chart, that seem to depict coastlines of Antarctica long before they were officially discovered, though most scholars attribute this to copying of older, unknown sources. Stone spheres in Costa Rica, perfect in their geometry, whose purpose remains elusive. These are not markers of alien worlds or hidden epochs, yet they unsettle because they remind us how much can be lost, how much is missing. If in a span of mere millennia we misplace the origins of tools and maps, what could be erased in millions of years? This unease stretches into myth, which often feels like memory written in dream language. The Egyptians spoke of Zep-Tepi, the first time, an era of gods who reigned before dynasties. In Greek tradition, Hesiod described ages of gold and silver, worlds destroyed and replaced by new ones. The The Dogon people of Mali carried astronomical knowledge of Sirius long before telescopes. Myths are not evidence, yet they are sediment of another kind, layering symbols over cataclysms, carrying through generations the impression that ours is not the first light to burn. The Silurian Hypothesis does not claim these as proof, but as resonance, the echo of humanity's intuition that what we see is only the latest layer. Conflict emerges sharply here. Scientists are trained to be skeptical, to insist on parsimonious explanations. To invoke lost civilizations is to invite ridicule, to step too close to the domain of pseudoscience, and yet the hypothesis exists precisely because it was raised by respected scientists who understood the necessity of humility. If humanity leaves only ambiguous traces, then how can we be sure the past is empty of them? Skepticism must also apply to our own certainty that no one came before. To dismiss the possibility outright is, in its own way, as unscientific as blind belief. The true discipline lies in holding the question open, in recognizing how fragile evidence becomes across vast stretches of time. The climax of this thought arrives when one contemplates the Anthropocene itself, our own geological mark. Imagine a paleontologist 50 million years in the future, sifting through layers of stone. She finds a spike of carbon dioxide, traces of plastics fossilized into rocks, rare earth metals concentrated oddly in a single stratum, isotopes that could only have emerged from nuclear reactions. Would she not wonder what burned here? What strange pulse of industry briefly flared and was gone? If she had no other evidence, no bones, no ruins, would she not ask the same question we ask now of the Pietm? And if so, then the mirror is perfect. We are the enigma we project onto the past. The thought quiets into a lullaby of philosophy. If civilizations can vanish so completely, then permanence is an illusion. Humanity may believe it builds for eternity, but the earth is patient and unsentimental. It has buried empires under sand, erased forests with ice, swallowed continents in fire. To be human is to live in a momentary clarity, a spark of self-awareness within a universe that doesn't promise remembrance. Perhaps the Silurian Hypothesis is less about others than about us, a reminder that our existence is neither guaranteed nor singular, that we walk upon a stage where others may have once stood, where others may yet stand again, long after our voices are gone. And so the question lingers in the shadows. What is more haunting, that we are the first, or that we are not? The silence of the earth does not answer, but in its silence we hear ourselves more clearly, the fragile resonance of a civilization wondering whether it too will one day be nothing more than a trace, a layer, a mystery for others to doubt. There is a quiet unease that follows when one contemplates the impermanence of all things, the realization that what seems immovable is only waiting to dissolve. The Silurian Hypothesis deepens this unease, for it reminds us that human history may not be the first to be woven, nor the last to unravel. Each epoch of the planet is a palimpsest, scraped clean by ice, flood, fire, and tectonic upheaval, written over by new lives, new forms, new cycles of flourishing and collapse. To imagine that an earlier civilization once breathed here is to accept that the earth has hidden its story with deliberate indifference. It does not matter whether those voices sang, built, discovered, or dreamed. They are now folded into silence, as all things eventually are. Geology offers its strange silences as well as its revelations. There is the mystery of the Carboniferous period, when forests flourished across vast swamps and atmospheric oxygen rose to levels far higher than today, allowing dragonflies with wingspans the length of a human arm to thrive. It was a time of abundance, but also of sudden and unexplained transitions. Fossil records reveal abrupt collapses in biodiversity, layered with coal seams that tell of entire ecosystems drowned, compressed, and transformed. Was this merely natural rhythm? Or could the seams conceal, within their mute blackness, traces of fire and industry too far dissolved to identify? The question cannot be answered, but the coal itself is a whisper, an archive of life burned away. More recent mysteries deepen the impression. The Younger Dryas, roughly 12,000 years ago, saw an unexpected plunge into near-glacial conditions, a cooling that disrupted early human cultures. Some propose a comet impact as the cause. Others argue for shifts in ocean circulation. But within this event are the faint fingerprints of sudden catastrophe, the kind that leaves behind not myths alone, but buried cities. Indeed, in recent decades, ruins submerged beneath the sea. At Yonaguni in Japan, Dwarka off the coast of India, have ignited debates. Are these natural rock formations or remnants of human construction? Scholars remain cautious, but the very debate illustrates how difficult it is to distinguish between geology's artistry and the work of conscious hands. Multiply that uncertainty across millions of years, and the impossibility of certainty becomes overwhelming. Myth again enters, not as proof but as resonance. The Hopi speak of previous worlds destroyed by fire and flood. The Norse remembered Ragnarok, in which fire and water remake the cosmos. The Egyptians spoke of cycles, of recurring ages ruled by gods before men. Are these only archetypes of human fear, or echoes of deeper resets woven into the very experience of existence on this earth? It is tempting to dismiss them, yet their persistence across cultures suggests that humans have always intuited a fragility in the ground beneath their feet. The Silurian Hypothesis gives form to that intuition, transforming it from myth into speculation framed by science. Conflict arises here between those who accept the narrative of linear progress and those willing to sit with ambiguity. The dominant view is clear. Civilization, as we define it, cities, writing, agriculture, technology, arose only once, within the last 10,000 years. Before that, humanity wandered as hunter-gatherers, shaping tools from stone. To imagine otherwise risks undermining the careful scaffolding of archaeology, which builds its chronology stone by stone. And yet, what if the scaffolding is itself incomplete, a partial structure overlooking absences too large to notice? Archaeology, after all, has rewritten history many times. Troy was once thought myth until Schliemann dug it up. The Maya were thought peaceful until their murals revealed warfare. What other revelations might still be buried, their meanings concealed until chance uncovers them? The climax of this meditation emerges in the recognition of cyclical destruction. The Earth has reset itself again and again. Volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, glaciations, sudden warmings, extinctions that sweep aside entire lineages. Each reset clears the slate. If an earlier civilization did exist, its story would have been obliterated by such resets, leaving only ambiguous chemical traces or anomalies in sediment. Our own Anthropocene signature will likely endure in similar form. Millions of years from now, If another intelligence searches, they may see only the isotopic scars of our combustion, the faint residue of our plastics, the strange concentration of metals we once mined. They may wonder if a people briefly shone here. They may argue among themselves, just as we argue now about the meaning of sudden warming events in deep time. It is in the lull of this thought that philosophy takes hold. To be human is to live with the illusion of permanence, to believe that what is built will outlast. Yet history itself proves otherwise. The Roman roads still visible in Europe once carried armies and merchants who are now dust. The temples of Angkor were consumed by jungle in mere centuries. If such erasures occur within millennia, what arrogance makes us think millions of years preserve anything of us at all? Perhaps the Silurian hypothesis is not only about whether others came before, but about reminding us how thin our existence truly is, how small our window in the vast theater of time. In this silence, one is left with a haunting image, a coastline buried under sand, where waves lap against stone that once held fire and song. No record remains, only the rhythm of the tide. And perhaps that is all there ever was. Cycles of rising, cycles of falling, memory dissolving into geology, civilizations folded into anonymity. The question of whether we are first or not remains unanswered, perhaps unanswerable, and yet it lingers, like a star seen faintly at the edge of vision, disappearing when looked at directly but present nonetheless, reminding us of the vastness of time, the frailty of memory, and the possibility that we walk not on virgin earth, but on the forgotten graves of ages. There are moments in the record of the earth that feel like absences rather than events, gaps that resist explanation, silences where a story should be. The Silurian hypothesis circles these silences with quiet persistence, suggesting not that they are evidence of what came before, but that they might conceal what we are not yet capable of seeing. For the earth is vast, layered with billions of years of transformation, and in that immensity, even the most dramatic eruption, the most violent upheaval, becomes a line in stone too thin to read. If a civilization rose and fell in that silence, what remains would be less than a whisper, less than dust. Consider the Great Oxidation Event, more than 2 billion years ago, when oxygen suddenly flooded the atmosphere, transforming the chemistry of the planet and enabling complex life. To science, this is explained by the evolution of cyanobacteria, a natural revolution written in microbes. Yet if we only knew the isotopic evidence without the fossils, would we not wonder what intelligence might have burned its way into the air? The signature of life-altering change is chemical, not architectural. It is written in ratios of elements, in patterns of gases. Our own civilization, too, inscribes itself chemically more than physically. If we vanish, it will be our gases, not our monuments, that last. And so the question emerges: how many other chemical anomalies are buried in the strata that we dismiss as chance? The Mesozoic, the age of dinosaurs, lasted for more than 160 million years. Within that span, entire continents shifted, seas advanced and withdrew, species flourished and vanished. We speak of the dinosaurs as though they were one continuous reign, but within that vastness were epochs we cannot imagine, lives we cannot reconstruct. If intelligence had flickered for even 1 million years within that span, how would we know? Fossils are rare accidents. Civilizations may be rarer still. 1,000,000 years is far longer than the lifespan of human civilization, yet to geology, it is less than a page. If a people rose and fell during that time, their story might already be lost to stone. And here, the myths rise again, casting shadows across continents. The Aboriginal Dreamtime speaks of ancestral beings who shaped the land before time began, their actions leaving imprints in rock and river. The Popol Vuh of the Maya tells of multiple creations, worlds made and destroyed before the current one. In Mesopotamia, kings listed in the Sumerian king list are said to have reigned for tens of thousands of years before the flood. These accounts are not literal chronicles, yet they reveal an enduring human intuition that the world has been made and remade, that ours is not the first dawn. The Silurian Hypothesis gives that intuition a scientific mirror, suggesting that beneath the poetry might lie forgotten cycles erased by the merciless patience of time. Conflict grows sharper when faced with the insistence of evidence. Archaeology is meticulous, its timelines built from pottery shards, radiocarbon dates, stratified remains. To speak of civilizations millions of years old seems to mock that labor. And yet, even within archaeology's span, absences loom. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built 12,000 years ago, rewrote assumptions about the origins of monumental architecture. Before its discovery, no one imagined hunter-gatherers capable of such construction. The discovery did not reveal a lost civilization, but it did remind us how fragile our models are, how easily new evidence overturns certainty. If within 12,000 years such a surprise can emerge, what of 12 million or 100? The climax of this speculation lies in imagining humanity's own end. If we were erased tomorrow, what would remain? Skyscrapers would crumble, highways vanish beneath forest, satellites fall to dust. In 10,000 years, almost nothing recognizable would survive. In 1,000,000, only the faintest chemical scars would endure. In 100 million, even those scars might be folded beneath mountains, melted in magma, washed into ocean trenches. A future species, unearthing our memory, might see only a brief pulse of warming, a peculiar spike of metals, a ghost of radiation. They might wonder what flickered here, but they would not know us. And so, when we look into the deep past and see similar pulses, are we not gazing into our own mirror? It is in the lull after this climax that the thought turns inward, towards philosophy. If civilizations vanish without trace, then permanence is an illusion not only for individuals, but for cultures. The monuments we build, the knowledge we preserve, the signals we send, all of it is transient against the canvas of geological time. Perhaps what matters is not that we endure, but that we burn brightly while we exist, that we contribute a verse, however brief, to the endless song of the cosmos. The Silurian Hypothesis, then, is less about proving a hidden past and more about awakening humility, reminding us that to be alive now is a fragile gift, one easily erased, one already destined to be forgotten by the stone that holds us. And so the question lingers in the silence of night. Do we walk upon untouched ground, or upon the ashes of those who came before? The earth does not answer. It only folds its secrets deeper into stone and water, waiting for those willing to listen to its silence and wonder what it conceals. When the thought drifts toward the possibility of forgotten civilizations, it is not ruins that dominate the imagination, but time itself. Time is the true eraser a force more relentless than fire or water. It does not shatter monuments, it dissolves them, folding them into earth until they are indistinguishable from stone. To look at the Silurian hypothesis through this lens is to see not a claim about mysterious ancestors, but an exploration of how thoroughly the past can be concealed. The question is not simply whether another civilization once walked the earth, but whether we could ever truly know if they had. The surface of the planet is young in its own way. Continents recycle themselves, dragged into the mantle by subduction zones, reborn in volcanoes, fractured by earthquakes. Ocean floors are even more temporary, disappearing into trenches every 200 million years. This means that even if an industrial species had flourished hundreds of millions of years ago, all direct evidence, their cities, their machines, their bones, would likely have vanished into molten stone. The only survivors would be indirect, anomalies in the chemical record, sudden changes in climate, subtle shifts in isotopes. We ourselves are leaving such marks. The Anthropocene will be written in nitrogen from fertilizers, in plastics fused into rocks, in radioactive isotopes scattered across the globe. Long after our libraries are ash, those signatures will remain. If another species ever studies them, what story will they invent about us? And if we encounter strange anomalies in our own geological past, how can we be sure those signatures are not the legacies of forgotten beings? The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum looms once more. That abrupt warming event 56 million years ago, when temperatures surged and the oceans acidified. To us, it appears as a natural upheaval, perhaps triggered by volcanic activity or methane release. But it is uncannily similar to the crisis we are creating now. What if the PETM was itself the signature of a civilization consumed by its own combustion? The thought is speculative, yet it haunts because it mirrors our present trajectory. If it is absurd to imagine, then why is it not absurd to accept the same future for ourselves? There are other curiosities. Unusual deposits of iridium, normally associated with asteroid impacts, appear not only at the famous boundary that ended the reign of dinosaurs, but scattered elsewhere, their origins uncertain. There are layers of soot, evidence of burning on scales difficult to attribute to lightning alone. There are sudden collapses in biodiversity, unexplained chemical shifts, mysterious interruptions in the rhythms of life. All of these can be explained by geology, by chance. But they can also be read differently, as signs of something hidden, something erased. The ambiguity is profound, and it is within that ambiguity that the Silurian hypothesis breathes. And then there are the myths, always the myths. Myths do not provide data, yet they carry resonance across cultures too disparate to dismiss lightly. Floods, fires, endless cycles of creation and destruction, worlds remade after cataclysm. The Maori tell of lands drowned by the sea. The Hindus speak of yugas, great cycles of rise and fall. The Sumerians recalled kings who reigned impossibly long before the flood. These stories may be nothing more than archetypes, human attempts to explain natural disasters. But they may also be fragments, memories carried across generations, distorted but not extinguished. Myths endure precisely because they touch something deep in human experience. The recognition that worlds do end and new ones begin. If we tell such stories after a mere few thousand years, what whispers might remain after millions? Conflict sharpens when such ideas are set against the discipline of science. Archaeologists and geologists are trained to resist speculation without evidence. The fossil record shows no signs of tool-making species before humans. Extinction events, climate shifts, isotope anomalies, all can be explained without invoking civilizations lost to time. To imagine otherwise is to risk leaving the firm ground of science for the uncertain fog of myth. And yet, as the originators of the hypothesis argued, science itself demands humility. The absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. If the deep past cannot speak clearly, then certainty is dangerous. Better to hold the question open, to admit that the earth may conceal more than we know. The climax of this meditation comes when one imagines the far future. Picture a world 50 million years from now. Humanity has vanished, its cities swallowed, its languages forgotten. Another species rises, clever enough to dig into the earth, to study its past. They find a narrow band of anomalies. Plastics, isotopes, carbon spikes, sudden warming. They debate endlessly what it means. Some argue it was a natural convulsion, others that it was the mark of an intelligent people consumed by their own excess. They will never know. To them, we will be as invisible as any hypothetical precursors are to us. The symmetry is perfect, and it is haunting. We are the enigma we project into the past. What follows this thought is a soft descent into philosophy. If civilizations are erased so thoroughly, then perhaps they were never meant to endure. Perhaps civilization itself is not the pinnacle of existence, but a fragile bloom, destined always to wither. Life itself is resilient. Bacteria, insects, plants will survive almost any cataclysm. But complexity, culture, intelligence, these may be temporary flames, flickering and vanishing again and again across eons. The Silurian hypothesis, then, is less a speculation about the past than a meditation on impermanence. It asks not only whether we are first, but whether it even matters. For in the scale of the cosmos, every civilization may be brief, every memory transient, every mark erased. And so the question remains, suspended like dust in twilight. If the earth has carried other voices before ours, then where are they now? Perhaps they have been folded into the coal we burn, the stone we walk upon, the air we breathe. Perhaps every breath is already shared with ghosts we cannot name. The silence of the earth is not empty, but full of secrets too vast to unfold. To live in this silence is to be humbled, to accept that the ground beneath us may not be blank, but written over countless times, each story erased, each voice forgotten, each civilization dissolved into nothing more than memory, hidden in stone. The earth is an archive without intention, a library whose pages are rewritten by fire, water, and time. Each stratum is a page, but most of the sentences have been erased. What remains are fragments, a fossilized tooth here, a seam of coal there, a sudden alteration in isotopes that speaks of catastrophe. The Silurian hypothesis lingers in these fragments, asking if they might conceal more than they reveal. It does not insist upon a hidden civilization, but it insists on the humility of uncertainty. If so much can be lost in so little time, how can we be certain of what the deep past has or has not held? Geologists describe the Cambrian explosion as if it were an awakening, an abrupt proliferation of forms, bodies suddenly hardening into shells and skeletons, diversity blooming almost overnight in evolutionary terms. Before it, life was soft-bodied, elusive, nearly invisible in the record. After it, the strata are filled with fossils. What provoked this sudden expansion? Most scholars turn to oxygen levels, to genetic triggers, to environmental shifts. Yet some thinkers allow themselves a pause, wondering whether the explosion of diversity might also hide other, stranger processes. If something stirred the biosphere toward complexity, could it not also have stirred toward intelligence, toward organization, toward culture, only to vanish again? Nothing in the record rules it out. Nothing in the record proves it either. We are left in the ambiguous shadow between absence and possibility. Another silence appears in the Devonian period, sometimes called the Age of Fishes, when oceans teemed with strange life and the first forests spread across land. Then came a series of extinction events, waves of collapse that reshaped ecosystems. The reasons remain debated: climate cooling, drops in oxygen, volcanic activity. But in the record of extinction, there is always room for the unspoken. If our own civilization collapsed today, our chemical signature would be inseparable from such natural processes. Plastics would degrade into fragments, nuclear isotopes would scatter, carbon would spike, and then all would fade into equilibrium. A future intelligence might read the event as purely geological. Why should we assume the past is clearer than the future will be? The myths of cycles return here, casting their quiet light. Hindu philosophy speaks of the kalpas, days and nights of Brahma, in which universes are born and destroyed, endlessly repeating. The Aztecs spoke of suns, previous worlds that ended before the present one. Even Hesiod's ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron spoke of successive declines and rebirths. These stories are not history, but they reflect a deep intuition that creation is not singular, but cyclical, that worlds rise and fall. The Silurian Hypothesis frames this intuition in scientific terms, suggesting that even on our own planet, civilizations may follow such rhythms, rising, burning, vanishing, leaving only the faintest traces. Conflict becomes sharper when myth and science overlap. Mainstream scholarship rightly demands caution. Fossils do not lie. No evidence of tool-making species exists before humans. Archaeology is consistent. Civilization as we know it, cities, writing, organized states, arose in the Holocene. To argue otherwise risks dissolving the boundary between disciplined inquiry and fantasy. Yet the hypothesis does not ask us to abandon evidence. It asks us to confront its limits. It reminds us that the absence of proof is not proof of absence, especially when the scale of time is so vast. What we call certainty may be no more than the blindness of perspective. The climax of this reflection appears when we turn the question inward. We ask not only, could there have been others? But also, how will we be remembered? Imagine that our species vanishes tomorrow. The ruins of our cities may last a few centuries, the pyramids perhaps a few millennia more, but in 10,000 years most will be gone. In 100,000, almost nothing will remain. In 1,000,000, only subtle chemical signatures will endure. Carbon ratios altered by our combustion, isotopes from our nuclear experiments, traces of plastic fossilized into stone. To a distant species sifting through the strata, these anomalies will look exactly like the ambiguous anomalies we now puzzle over. They may debate whether we ever existed at all. We are, in other words, creating the very mystery we now project into the past. And what of the stars? The Fermi paradox asks why the universe seems so quiet when it should be alive with signals. Perhaps the answer lies in the same silence that haunts the Silurian hypothesis. Civilizations flare and collapse, leaving behind traces too subtle to recognize. On other worlds, too, there may be anomalies in rock and air that are nothing more than scars of forgotten cultures. We may already have walked past such evidence on Mars, dismissed it as geology. We may have peered at Venus's clouds and overlooked a signature erased by time. If intelligence arises everywhere but endures nowhere, then the cosmos is a vast cemetery of lost voices. The descent into philosophy is inevitable. If everything is erased, then what is the meaning of civilization itself? Perhaps permanence is not the measure of significance. A song that echoes once and fades is no less beautiful for its brevity. A flame that burns for a moment still warms the darkness. To exist, even briefly, is to leave an impression on the universe, however faint. The Silurian hypothesis reminds us not of certainty, but of humility, not of permanence, but of fragility. To walk upon the earth is to walk upon layers of forgotten stories, to live within a silence that may be more crowded than we can imagine. And so the question lingers: are we the first or merely the latest? The earth does not answer. It only folds its pages, hides its archives in stone, waits for new eyes to look upon its silence. Perhaps one day we will learn to read its erased sentences. Or perhaps the silence will remain, eternal and unbroken, reminding us that what we call history is only a fragment, a sliver of memory in an ocean of forgetting. There are nights when silence feels heavier than sound, when one senses that the earth itself is holding its breath, guarding secrets too vast to reveal. The Silurian hypothesis is born out of that silence, asking questions without demanding answers, suggesting possibilities that shimmer like mirages across deep time. It is less a claim than a meditation, less an assertion than a lingering doubt. If others once walked here, where are they now? The difficulty is not only the scarcity of evidence, but the nature of time itself, which buries, erases, and transforms until even the most extraordinary becomes ordinary stone. To understand this, one must look at how the earth conceals. Consider subduction, the slow swallowing of ocean floors into the mantle. Every 200 million years, nearly all seafloor vanishes, recycled into magma, reborn as volcanic crust. If a civilization had risen along coasts or beneath shallow seas, as ours has, its ruins would be dragged beneath continents, melted and lost. Even entire continents can disappear. Zealandia, the nearly submerged continent beneath New Zealand, remained hidden from recognition until recently. If such a land can be forgotten in plain sight, how many others have been erased entirely? Then there are the sudden convulsions, the resets that strike without mercy. The Chicxulub impact 66 million years ago is the most famous, its crater still faintly visible beneath Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, its mark a thin line of iridium scattered across the globe. It ended the reign of the dinosaurs, clearing space for mammals to flourish. But in that same moment of destruction, what else was erased? If a species had flourished before, its story would have ended in that fire. Its traces, reduced to ash, scattered into oceans, folded into sediments. We assume no one was there to witness it, but certainty is not possible. All we know is that silence followed. Anomalies in the geological record often feel like half-formed words. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, again and again, lingers as a question. A sudden surge of carbon, oceans warming, ecosystems collapsing. Was it volcanism, methane release, or something stranger? More recently, the Younger Dryas cooling event unsettles researchers. Its cause is debated. A comet impact, a disruption of ocean currents, or something unknown. Each of these moments could be read as geological accidents, and perhaps they are. Yet they could also be the signatures of civilizations erased, their endings mistaken for natural rhythms. The ambiguity itself is haunting. The record cannot tell us intent, only result. And always, beneath science, the myths endure. They rise from every corner of the world like smoke from unseen fires. The Mayans spoke of suns destroyed before the present age. The Norse imagined a cycle of destruction and rebirth in Ragnarok. The Hopi told of previous worlds consumed by flood and flame. Even the ancient Egyptians hinted at Zep Tepi, a first time when gods ruled before humanity. None of these are literal histories, yet their resonance lies in their persistence. They suggest a collective intuition, an awareness that history is cyclical, that worlds have ended before and will end again. The Silurian Hypothesis transforms this intuition into scientific speculation, asking whether such cycles might extend deeper than myth remembers. Conflict emerges when the hypothesis confronts the discipline of science. Geology and archaeology are rigorous, rooted in evidence that can be measured, dated, replicated. They insist that no tool-making species existed before humans. No cities stood in epochs older than 10,000 years. The fossil record shows nothing resembling us, and yet, even within accepted history, surprises abound. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe challenged assumptions about the origins of monumental architecture. The Antikythera mechanism revealed unexpected technological sophistication in ancient Greece. These discoveries remind us how fragile our reconstructions are, how easily they can shift when a single artifact comes to light. If such revisions can occur within a few millennia, how much more uncertain is our knowledge of millions of years? The climax of this reflection is not a revelation, but a mirror. We see ourselves in the anomalies of the past, the carbon spikes, the sudden warmings, the layers of soot. They resemble the very scars we are carving now into the earth. Our Anthropocene is a geological event in progress, a transformation visible in isotopes, in plastics, in chemical residues. If we vanish, these will be our legacy. They will not look extraordinary. They will look like other anomalies in the record, indistinguishable from natural upheavals. A future intelligence may debate us as we now debate the PETM. They may never know us, just as we may never know if others came before. Philosophy softens the edges of this thought. Perhaps civilization is not meant to endure. Perhaps it is a phenomenon that flares briefly, like bioluminescence in the deep sea, illuminating the darkness for a moment before fading. If so, then our place in the cosmos is not diminished but clarified. We are not eternal architects but fleeting sparks, and our meaning lies not in permanence but in presence. To exist at all, even briefly, is to be part of the vast rhythm of creation and erasure. And so the question lingers in the hush of night. What if the earth has already known others? What if we are not the first flame but only the most recent? The silence offers no reply. Yet within that silence lies a strange beauty, The awareness that we are part of a mystery larger than ourselves, a story written not in words, but in stone and fire and memory too faint to name. Perhaps that is enough. To walk in wonder upon a world that may be haunted not by ghosts of the dead, but by civilizations dissolved into the very ground we tread. The past is not a line, but a haze, a fog that thickens the further one peers. It is comforting to believe that history moves in clarity from one step to the next, but the truth is that most of it is lost, blurred, or folded back into the earth. The Silurian Hypothesis thrives in this uncertainty, inhabiting the spaces where the record is incomplete, where silence is thicker than evidence. It is not the declaration that others surely lived here before us, but the recognition that if they had, their presence would look much like absence. Consider the limits of the fossil record. Fossils are not common, but rare accidents of preservation. Most life leaves no trace. Of all the species that have ever lived, only a fraction are known to us. Their bones or shells captured by chance in sediments that escaped erosion and subduction. If entire lineages can be erased so thoroughly, what of a civilization whose tools and dwellings were made not of stone, but of fibers, metals, or materials that dissolve in mere centuries? Even our most enduring monuments will not survive the churn of geological time. The question then becomes not whether there is evidence of precursors, but whether such evidence could possibly endure. There are strange interruptions in Earth's memory that invite contemplation. One is the mysterious mid-Miocene climatic optimum about 15 million years ago, when global temperatures rose sharply, only to decline again. The cause is debated. Tectonic shifts, volcanic outpourings, greenhouse gas fluctuations. To most, these are natural processes. But to the Silurian Hypothesis, the event resembles our present moment too closely to ignore. A sudden warming, ecosystems strained, oceans altered, signatures we are now writing into stone. Could that warming, like ours, have been a mark of industry? Or is it only our reflection projected backward, a reminder that we are not as unique as we believe? Another enigma lies in sudden deposits of metals. In some layers, concentrations of nickel, chromium, or rare earths appear abruptly. Most geologists attribute these to volcanic intrusions or asteroid impacts, but these metals are also the very ones extracted by industrial societies. The coincidence is unsettling, though not proof of anything. It demonstrates how the Earth's natural chemistry and the chemistry of civilization overlap. How difficult it would be to separate one from the other after millions of years. If we cannot distinguish our own signal from geology in the far future, how can we expect to do so with certainty in the deep past? Myths again drift into the conversation like fragments of a forgotten dream. The Sumerians wrote of a flood that reset the world. The Maya spoke of suns destroyed one after another. Polynesian chants recall lands swallowed by the ocean. The Dogon described cosmic knowledge long before telescopes. These are not historical records, yet they are more than stories. They reveal an enduring sense that worlds are fragile, temporary, easily broken and remade. They echo what geology already shows, that the Earth resets itself again and again. The Silurian Hypothesis takes this resonance seriously, not as evidence, but as a reminder that human imagination has always been haunted by the possibility that others once were, and are now, gone. The conflict with science is stark. mainstream archaeology insists there is no trace of pre-human civilizations. Every artifact studied falls within the known span of human history. Every bone belongs to familiar lineages. To suggest otherwise risks the company of pseudoscience and fantasy. Yet the hypothesis does not propose Atlantis or mythic kingdoms. It proposes humility, that time erases more than we can recover, and that absence is not certainty. Science itself acknowledges the incompleteness of the record. What we see is not the whole, only fragments. To recognize this is not to abandon reason, but to extend it into silence. The climax comes when we imagine our own disappearance. If humanity ended tomorrow, if every city were emptied, what would survive? In centuries, forests would reclaim the land. In millennia, metals would corrode, glass would fragment, plastics would crumble into invisible particles. In tens of millennia, almost nothing recognizable would remain. After millions of years, all would be gone, buried, recycled, erased. What would be left are only the subtle signatures, spikes of carbon, traces of plastics fused into stone, isotopes from nuclear detonations. To any future intelligence, these would appear as anomalies, indistinguishable from natural events. They might argue about us as we argue about the petum, never able to prove whether we were here. This mirror is unsettling. To ask about others is to confront our own impermanence. Philosophy enters in the lull, softening but deepening the unease. If civilizations are so easily erased, then perhaps civilization itself is not meant to endure. Perhaps intelligence is less a permanent achievement than a passing phase, a brief experiment repeated across planets and times, always ending in silence. Life itself is resilient. Microbes, plants, and insects will endure almost anything. But culture, language, technology, these are fragile blooms, like desert flowers that appear after rain and vanish by dawn. To imagine forgotten civilizations is to imagine ourselves, bright for a moment, then gone, leaving only faint chemical shadows. And so the question remains, unresolved. Are we alone in our story, or do we walk on layers of forgotten histories, our every step pressing down on the graves of worlds erased? The earth does not answer. It is both too old and too silent, its memory written in fragments too faint to decode. The Silurian hypothesis lingers not as proof, but as presence, a reminder that certainty is an illusion, that silence itself may be crowded, and that we are never as permanent as we imagine. The longer one dwells on the silence of the deep past, the more it takes on a presence of its own. Silence becomes not emptiness, but a veil, a curtain drawn across histories that may or may not have existed. The Silurian hypothesis inhabits this silence, asking questions we cannot resolve but cannot forget. It is a thought experiment, yes, but also an unsettling mirror. What we cannot find in the past reflects what will not be found of us in the future. The record of the planet is littered with resets. The end of the Ordovician period saw nearly 85% of species vanish, likely due to glaciation and shifts in carbon dioxide. The Devonian extinctions came in waves, wiping out coral reefs that had thrived for millions of years. The Permian extinction, most devastating of all, erased 90% of life. These are usually attributed to volcanic outpourings, asteroid impacts, or atmospheric changes. Yet they also resemble what a collapsing civilization might leave behind: sudden carbon imbalances, rapid warming or cooling, widespread burning. To us, they are natural disasters. But to a future intelligence looking at the Anthropocene, our own industrial scars may appear the same. The ambiguity is complete. Take, for instance, the curious traces of soot in ancient strata. These suggest global fires, forests consumed on vast scales. Lightning can explain much, volcanism more. But what if some of these burn layers were the unintentional legacy of beings who set fire to their world, as we now set fire to ours? It is impossible to prove, but the question itself unsettles. For in considering it, we recognize our own fragility, our own capacity for self-erasure. The geological record does not distinguish between nature and culture. It records only the fact of burning. The imagination stretches further when one recalls that life on Earth has spanned nearly 4 billion years. For almost all of that time, life was microscopic. Complex organisms arose late, intelligence later still. Yet time is so vast that even a million-year civilization would vanish without a trace. Humanity's entire industrial era has lasted barely 3 centuries. Against such scales, what confidence can we possibly have that nothing else flickered before us? To say we are the first is less a conclusion than an act of faith in absence. And then there are anomalies that feel like riddles. The so-called out-of-place objects scattered through history, artifacts that seem too advanced for their age, though often explained away as hoaxes or misinterpretations. The Baghdad battery, the Antikythera mechanism, ancient maps that chart coastlines long before exploration. None of these prove a hidden past, but they remind us how incomplete our own story remains. If such surprises can emerge within thousands of years, what might lie hidden in millions? The further back we look, the less the Earth reveals. The myths keep returning, like echoes from a deeper chamber. Atlantis, swallowed by the sea, remembered by Plato not as metaphor alone, but as something told to him as history. Kumari Kandam, a sunken land in Tamil tradition, the Hopi cycles of destruction and renewal, the Norse prophecy of Ragnarok, where fire consumes and water drowns, only for the world to rise again. Each culture carries its own memory of erasure. They are not literal chronicles, but they hold a resonance that cannot be dismissed. They remind us that human imagination has always intuited the fragility of worlds, the inevitability of resets. Science and myth may speak different languages, but both tell us the same truth. Nothing lasts. The conflict with mainstream thought is sharp. Archaeology points to humanity alone as the maker of cities, the shaper of tools, the architect of civilization. There are no fossilized skeletons of another intelligence, no evidence of writing or technology older than 10,000 years. To imagine otherwise seems reckless, even dangerous. Yet the hypothesis doesn't ask us to believe, it asks us to consider. If our own mark will vanish almost entirely, why should we assume we would be able to detect another? Certainty, in this context, is arrogance. Absence of evidence is the very result we should expect if others once existed. The climax of this meditation is the mirror it holds up to us. Look at the Anthropocene through the eyes of the distant future. What would remain? A spike of carbon, a thin band of plastics, isotopes from nuclear fire, concentrations of metals mined and discarded. Nothing more. Our monuments will not endure, our languages will not be deciphered, our memories will not be preserved. We will be a mystery, debated by species who cannot prove whether we existed at all. They will see only a shadow of change, a sudden convulsion in the Earth's chemistry, and they will wonder. We are the enigma we project backward. The Silurian Hypothesis is not a theory about others, but a reflection on ourselves. And then comes the lull, the quiet descent into thought. Perhaps the cosmos is filled with forgotten civilizations, each erased by time, each leaving only faint traces indistinguishable from nature. Perhaps intelligence is not the crown of evolution, but a passing experiment, one repeated and erased across galaxies. If so, then our place is not diminished, but shared. We are not alone, not because others walk among us, but because others may have walked before us, their footsteps already turned to dust. The silence of the earth is deep, but not empty. It holds questions like seeds waiting in the soil, questions that may never sprout into answers, but nonetheless shape how we see ourselves. To wonder if we are first is to confront impermanence, to recognize that what we call civilization is fragile as glass. To accept that we may not be first is to acknowledge that we are part of a cycle larger than memory, larger than history, larger than humanity itself. And so the question lingers, as it always does. What if the ground beneath us is haunted, not by spirits, but by civilizations erased so completely that only silence remains? The earth doesn't answer. It holds its secrets in stone and fire, and in that silence we glimpse the truth that permanence is a dream, and that our own story, too, will dissolve into the unremembered. There is a moment when one contemplates the deep time of the earth, where silence itself seems to bend and acquire weight, as though beneath our feet lies not just stone, but entire histories compressed into forgetting. The Silurian Hypothesis dwells in this silence, whispering a possibility both unsettling and strangely comforting. Perhaps we are not the first to build, not the first to dream, not the first to fall. If so, their traces are now inseparable from geology, hidden in the folds of strata, in the chemical scars of ancient air and ocean. To believe we could ever uncover them fully may be an illusion, but to imagine them alters how we see ourselves. Think of the Pleistocene, that restless epoch of ice and thaw, when glaciers carved valleys and seas rose to drown plains. Humanity itself nearly vanished during these cycles, our numbers reduced to precarious handfuls. Yet we endured, and in endurance built the first seeds of what would become civilization. But if our species could nearly disappear within a few thousand years of climate upheaval, what might have happened to any precursors millions of years earlier? Ice would grind their cities to gravel. Floods would scatter their remnants across seabeds. Shifting sands would bury their memory. What would remain? Nothing but echoes in chemistry, anomalies in sediments, puzzles that we might misinterpret or dismiss as ordinary cycles. One is drawn again to the great extinctions: the Devonian collapse, the Permian cataclysm, the Cretaceous impact. Each is a page torn from the book of life. We assume these were blind disasters, but what if one or more coincided with the decline of a civilization erased so thoroughly that it is indistinguishable from catastrophe itself? If our own Anthropocene collapse were to occur tomorrow, would it not resemble such an event? Fossil fuels burned, carbon spiking, ecosystems collapsing, species vanishing, an echo of extinctions past. The possibility does not prove itself, but it reframes our gaze. What if what we call natural history sometimes includes hidden histories too? And there are always the riddles of myth, stories of floods, fires, cycles of creation and destruction, repeat across the world like recurring dreams. The Mayans spoke of earlier suns destroyed. The Mesopotamians remembered a flood that reset kingship itself. In Vedic traditions, yugas stretch across vast spans, each ending in dissolution. The Norse foresaw Ragnarok, not as metaphor but as destiny. Even Aboriginal Dreamtime speaks of ancestral beings whose acts shaped the land in a time before time. These stories may be allegories, but their universality is striking. They hint at an ancient intuition that the ground beneath us is not stable but layered, that others have walked before and been forgotten. The Silurian Hypothesis gives this intuition a scientific frame, asking whether the myths are fragments of memory too old to measure. Conflict arises here, as it always must. The sciences resist speculation without data. Archaeology is clear. Humanity alone has produced cities, writing, and machines. Geology confirms no trace of predecessors. Fossils yield no rival intelligence. To imagine otherwise risks diluting evidence with fantasy. Yet the hypothesis doesn't ask for belief, only for humility. It reminds us that absence of proof isn't proof of absence, especially when the erasures of time are so complete. In 100 million years, our own legacy will be as ambiguous as any anomaly we study now. To deny the possibility of precursors outright is, paradoxically, an act of faith in emptiness. The climax of this meditation is the mirror it places before us. If another intelligence studies the Earth 50 million years hence, what will they see of us? A thin band of altered carbon, a dusting of plastics, isotopes from nuclear fire, strange concentrations of metals. They may interpret it as volcanism, as meteor impact, as natural cycle. They may argue endlessly about whether intelligence ever lived here at all. They will not find our libraries, our languages, our monuments. They will not know our music or our grief. We will be a question without an answer, just as we now wonder about those who may have been before us. The symmetry is haunting. We are the riddle we project backward. In the quiet that follows, philosophy takes hold. If civilizations are erased so easily, perhaps civilization itself is not the summit of evolution, but a recurring spark, brief and fragile. Intelligence may be an experiment the cosmos conducts again and again, its outcomes fleeting, its traces impermanent. Life endures. Bacteria, fungi, forests will outlast us, as they have outlasted countless others. But culture, consciousness, the fragile weaving of meaning into matter, these may always be temporary, fragile flames that flare and vanish. If so, then permanence is not the measure of worth. The meaning of civilization lies not in how long it endures, but in the intensity with which it shines. And so the question persists, are we first, or merely the latest verse in an unending poem the Earth refuses to recite? The planet does not answer. It keeps its secrets in silence, in stone, in the slow breathing of tides. But perhaps that silence is not emptiness. Perhaps it is fullness, crowded with forgotten voices dissolved into air and water and soil. Perhaps we walk not upon untouched ground, but upon layers of memory so deep they have become indistinguishable from Earth itself. The final image is not of discovery, but of surrender. One stands at the edge of the sea at night, watching waves erase footprints as though they were never there. Above, the stars burn in cycles older than imagination. Beneath, the earth turns, indifferent and eternal. Whether we are first or not, whether others came before, we too will be erased, our story folded into the same silence. And yet, in that fleeting spark of awareness, in this fragile moment of asking, there is something eternal after all.